So this video is going to evaluate the discussions for part 2 of the assignment. And I think that my views have changed a little bit on the discussions since the last evaluation. In one way, they've grown on me, and in another way, I'm not sure how I feel about them anymore. But anyways, I find that the discussions kind of more about learning a lesson kind of in each one, like trying something new, and it's not really been about the actual material, which I think is kind of the most important thing. Like, yeah, it's good to focus on other things, but I also like to just be able to go over the questions sometimes and just, be able to get other people's opinions without having to do it in a different setting every time. Like, for instance, on February 3rd, we did a discussion on Chapter 4 and 5, which I didn't really understand because the professor wanted us to read both of them, and then there was questions on both chapters put together. So they were really long chapters, each of them were, and then they were put together for some reason. So I just felt like we didn't really get anywhere with those because we didn't get into depth of the chapter at all. But anyways, in this discussion, we got into partners, and we had to go through our partners' answers, and then we had to try and paraphrase them to the rest of our group. So what I didn't like about this particular exercise was that by the end, everyone had all kind of said the same thing because everyone was required to give their partner's answer. So by the time we got to the last person, it had all kind of been paraphrased in a way that made sense to everyone, and it was just kind of repetitive. And also what I didn't like about this was that I only got to go through half of the questions, and as did the other half of the class, because we were split into two groups. So it was just like the other person's questions. I believe I had Kayla's, and it was just like Paula's questions weren't even included at all, even though I had done them. So I thought that was kind of could have been handled a little bit better. But what I will say, what I liked about this discussion was the fact, like, which I think is what the professor was trying to get at us, was that it's hard to really articulate what you're trying to say on paper and then in a way that someone else can portray it properly, because the way a person speaks is a lot different than how they write sometimes. So that was kind of interesting to see how people kind of would jump in when someone was trying to paraphrase their work because they weren't really getting it right. There was one question also that me and Roberta had both answered. Roberta's my partner, and it was the first question, I think, about overcoming the barriers of romantic style. And I had said that we should just get to know these barriers and become aware of them and then learn to work through them. Whereas Roberta said we should study treatises, we should look into old books, we should go to teachers, and we should even study different subjects such as like anthropology and English and psychology so that we can see how these sort of subjects affect barriers in sort of a non-musical way. So I thought that was interesting, and I think most of my group members did too. So moving on to the second discussion, that was on February 10th, and we had to do chapter 6, and this was another big circle discussion. I was kind of happy that we'd stayed away from the big circle discussions. I don't think that everyone really gets their input put in the big circle discussions, but I understand that some people wanted them. So I don't know. I didn't mind this discussion for the first part, but what I didn't understand was how Nick's questions were used as a kind of an experiment, because Roberta's questions were treated in just a normal way, whereas Nick, being like probably the smartest kid in our class, once again was sort of singled out. I don't know. To me, it didn't seem fair. So, and the fact that we all went up to the front of the class and talked, I understood the beginning of that in the sense that, yeah, it's different being in front of someone talking, but by the time the fifth or sixth person was up there, it was just like we were talking in a circle again. So I thought that was just a little bit pointless. What I liked, though, was Roberta's question on improvising. I think that improvising is part of being a musician, and like I think I said this even in the discussion, that we all sort of improvise in our own way when we're playing, because there's always those times when you forget things or you just don't know what note comes next and you just kind of make it up. And so I found it strange that a lot of my classmates said they had really done no improvisation because our classes seems to be very classical. It's very classically trained and by the book, whereas there's other musicians out there who maybe aren't studying it and they can improvise like nobody's business. So it was just interesting to me. So basically, to conclude on the discussions, um, I don't know. I think they have a place in our class, and I don't mind them. I honestly think that all university classes should be required to have some discussions because although I feel that sometimes in this class, people's answers are a little bit forced and not always necessarily like necessary, I think that when students are given the opportunity to say what they're really thinking in their opinions as opposed to just exactly what the professor is telling them and they don't have an opinion at all, then we're not like able to learn in the best way and we're not challenged and our views aren't challenged because when you discuss something you have to put it into a way that you think makes sense and a way that someone else is going to understand. So that's kind of how I feel about the discussions and I'm assuming we're not going to stop doing them, but I think that they're kind of starting to grow on me more and more.